go ahead and get that recording started, and that will be available to you. So again, thank you for participating in our session on the NIST 800-171 changes and what they may mean to you. We'll talk a little bit about the current compliance requirements as it relates to those of you who are servicing contracts with the Department of Defense, what impact the changes of the proposed changes to the NIST 800-171, what they're calling Rev 3, may mean to your organization, and what effect that has on the CMMC and the cybersecurity module. So apologize, just had a little distraction there, but we will go ahead and talk about that, and then we'll talk about how we can leverage technology to help automate your compliance activities. And we'll provide a very brief product demonstration to show you how SureShield can help with that. We will also take a couple of polls along the way, so we ask you to respond to those polls. And for those of you who are interested, we will make an offer to actually test out a solution that can help you with these compliance activities. Obviously, many of you, I don't need to go into a lot around what are the compliance issues for the defense industrial base. We continue almost daily to hear about new issues with infiltration from foreign hackers. There was a notice just today about issues with Chinese hackers trying to get in and steal a lot of sensitive data. And as we know, the whole process around what they call CMMC, or the cybersecurity maturity model, came from the issues of providers that were asked to make sure they were compliant with the NIST 800-171 requirements, which is a requirement of contracting. They were finding that there was, issues with sometimes that not being properly validated, and as such, there were organizations that were getting hacked. So the government has decided that they are going to implement a program that is intended to go into place next year, that for many of you, any of you that are handling CUI data, controlled unclassified information, will have to go through a third-party assessment process. Now, for all providers, every single one of them is going to have to go through some type of oversight of their compliance to the NIST 800-171 requirements. The government did decide to standardize on 800-171. So even when CMMC comes into play, the foundation behind looking at your cybersecurity posture will be based on that 800-171 score. And today, you are required as a supplier to submit a 800-171 score to the supplier performance risk system. And that also needs to be accompanied by what they call a system security plan, which gives an overview of your basic network architecture, as well as your performance against these compliance standards. And in addition, it does require you to provide a plan of action and milestone report as well. That is a report that outlines any of these controls that you do not currently have in place, what your intention is in terms of when you are going to get those in place, how you're going to get them in place in the time frame around those. And as I mentioned, this does affect the entire DIB. Now, to complicate this a little bit, as we know today, all providers are required to comply with the current NIST 800-171 process. NIST is now proposing a change or a revision to the 800-171. And what does that mean for you? Well, the number of controls that will be in place, that are required to be in place, will not change. It's still 110. And a lot of this is driven off of what they call the NIST 853, which is a even more complex set of controls focused on good cyber hygiene and security requirements. As it relates to the Department of Defense, those have been narrowed down to 110 that are specific around protecting what they call that controlled unclassified information. And today, under the current proposed rule, about 27 of those controls will be theoretically withdrawn. Withdrawn does not mean that they're going away. They may be repositioned in another set of controls, and then they are going to add some new controls. Additionally, there's going to be what they call 3 new families added to this as well. So today you have things like access controls, security training and the like. There are going to be 3 new families, and I'll kind of outline those a little bit when we go into some product overviews. Now, what does this mean to you as it relates to CMMC? Does it have any impact on CMMC? And the answer is no. The head of the Department of Defense kind of cyber process has just indicated again and reiterated that the 800-171 is going to be the foundational framework for CMMC accreditation. However, what it does potentially mean to you is that today you have to comply with these 800-171 current requirements, and you're going to need to have your company at least positioned to then comply with the new changes. And while the outline of the 800-171 may be the same, there will be some significant modifications to that. So very importantly, it's important that you're getting your things in place right now and being prepared for that. One thing that has been noted in those changes is that there is going to be recommendations as part of your process, irregardless of CMMC, that you have some independent assessments done, meaning you should have some groups potentially outside your organization providing an assessment of your overall security posture as it relates to these changes. And even a little bit more questioning around this is that NIST intends to have these in place by the beginning of 2024, roughly in the spring of 2024. And CMMC in and of itself is expected to go into effect with the rule most likely towards the middle to end of 2024. I'm not going to go into a lot of the details around this. You'll note when you do receive the presentation, I've provided a hyperlink to the most recent presentation that was done as it relates to these changes, and also have indicated you can hear or pull from them the recording of that previous presentation. They are right now asking for input. They do intend to, by the middle of July, to take that input and then establish those final rules. So I would encourage those of you who are participating or have greater knowledge of this to at least go and understand what those proposed changes are, as well as to add any comments you may have in terms of, agreeing or not agreeing, or because this will be going into effect. Additionally, you can pick this up in that presentation, but they will basically show you a table of what the revisions are as it relates to those different families, what has been added, what has been changed, if anything, what's significant, what is perhaps not significant. What we want to encourage and let you know as it relates to SureShield and how we can help. We have, since the beginning of time with our compliance frameworks, built in what we call automated crosswalks. So at any given point in time, this has already happened once with the first revision of CMMC when we were at the 5 levels of control. We had done all the mapping from NIST 800-171 to the 5 levels of controls. Those were then reduced back to 3. And those were, again, based upon what they would call the level 1, 2, and 3 of CMMC. We've done all that mapping off of the foundational NIST 800-171. And our team is already reviewing what is coming into place right now. And we'll be able to assist anyone that's working with the current version to make sure that all relevant controls are mapped into the new process, saving you time, eliminating your need to actually redo this at any given point in time. And that's been a significant time saver and helper for the clients that we work with. So again, what will you need to do to meet these requirements? You're going to have to eventually, if you are handling COI data, you'll have to have an audit against the CMMC and the NIST 800-171 frameworks as they exist today and how they will exist in the future. Components of that also require things like a vulnerability scan to be done and identifying vulnerabilities and remediating gaps. Those are control requirements. We can assist you with that. There, of course, are others that do the same, but bringing a lot of this together is what SureShield does. And you'll need to remediate against any identified issues. You'll have specific reports that you have to provide, and you are going to require to have defined policies and procedures that are related to that NIST 800-171 control set, both today and what will be changing down the line. And you'll need to be prepared to modify your new, the new NIST 800-171 changes when they are implemented. So before we continue on, I'm just going to take a brief poll and get an idea from the audience here. How many of you have actually completed a NIST assessment? And are you able to update that? One thing that we want to point out to you, again, and we've done this for several clients that we work with today, is even if they have conducted an assessment in the past, many of them have been done in what I would call a manual fashion. So it's not easy for them to come in and actually make changes and recompute scores and the likes. Should you be interested, SureShield can actually take your previous scores, bring them into our systems, and not only help you with that continuous process, but as these new changes take place, we'll be able to automatically and immediately update them to whatever are going to be the new NIST 800-171 R revision 3 processes. So it looks like about half of the audience here has completed an assessment. There's actually half that have not. I would encourage you, again, if you are participating in any kind of Department of Defense contract, both as either as a sub and or as a prime contractor. If you're a prime, you probably already know that you have to have this done, but you should be getting your ducks in order to have your assessment done, your scores computed and submitted to the SPRS. It will and is a requirement of most contracts today, and will certainly be a requirement of any contracts coming forth now. And then, of course, when the new rule with CMMC is in place, it will be a requirement for all contracts. So you can't even begin to start if you don't have these things in place. And it looks like a lot of the folks that have even said that they've conducted an assessment, the majority of you don't have what I would call a continuous tool. So you'll need to prepare to do that again, or you can take some assistance, as I mentioned, from SureShield to help you in that process. So with that, I just wanted to spend just a brief minute to tell you how you can benefit from the SureShield solutions. We're going to focus specifically today on just one of those, but again, what we provide is software that helps automate this process. So we will provide the appropriate crosswalks to help you do your current NIST 800-171 assessment. We've mapped that to the CMMC requirements, and we will harmonize those across this when the V3 changes are approved and implemented. And as I mentioned, our team is already working on what they've seen today and are preparing for that when that final rule as regards to that is in place. So again, trying to provide assurances to our customers that we can help you take care of what you need to do now, and you're not going to have to worry about any significant changes for yourself when these new requirements or these new control sets are put into place. We're going to help make that very easy for you. We also help you identify that CUI data and give you tools to help protect that information, which is a critical and really the primary focus of the NIST 800-171 and the CMMC requirements. We help you do vulnerability scanning so you can see within your environment, or we can assist your providers who are helping you in that regard to identify vulnerabilities very easily and tell you what the risk of those are, and most importantly, how to remediate and get rid of those. And we have provided all of the automation around all the compliance required reporting that you need to be providing as a provider to these folks as well. So we do that under the auspices of our product called ComplyShield, and I'm about to go in and show you a brief demonstration of ComplyShield. It's a web-enabled, so it's very easy to deploy. It's a continuous compliance monitoring solution. So as I mentioned, it's not static in nature. Anytime you make modifications or changes to it, our system will update and give you a real-time view as to where you stand today. It will even show you your gaps, and it will show you your progression on your compliance. As I mentioned, we've built in a very sophisticated crosswalking process. So if you are working with other compliance frameworks, maybe you're in healthcare and you have HIPAA requirements, or you have ISO requirements, or you have SOC requirements. In addition to these, we have solutions that are built in that also do that crosswalking, so that when there are like controls, there's no need to actually gather different evidence. There's no reason to answer the questions multiple times. Our system will help do that for you. And we'll compute all of the required reports you need to submit for this. Additionally, we also provide what we call a automated scanning solution process. So meaning a compliance scan where we can go pull specific information from within your networks to help provide evidence as to whether you meet certain compliance control requirements. And that is a big time saver as well. As you know, with any type of control, it's not just whether you've implemented this or whether you haven't, but if you've indicated that you've implemented it, you need to provide backup supporting evidence and proof that you've done that. So we have ways that we can pull specific information from within your systems that will provide that evidence to to support an answer to a question, and to make it easy to update that on a regular basis. And then, of course, most importantly, it's a very, very affordable solution for you as well. So I'm going to go in and just provide a very brief overview of our product suite. And I'm actually just going to focus in most specifically on the compliance frameworks, because again, this will be something that will be changing, as you know, for you, and how we go about helping you with that. So I've opened up what we call our solution, and at these top tiles is what I want to concentrate on right now as it relates to what we call our compliance solution. So you'll note within here, this top tile is showing me that I'm monitoring within my organization against 220 controls. It's giving me some initial endpoint into where I am in terms of my overall compliance with those controls. You'll note we have a tile that relates to policies, so that you can actually look at your compliance from a policy perspective. And I do want to point out, with our products, we provide, with all of our compliance solutions, we provided templated policies. So with any control set, you not only have to have answers to controls, but you need to have policies and procedures that show how you respond and how you address those particular controls. Oftentimes, for smaller organizations, having those policies can be difficult and can be time-consuming and costly to create and have. So we provide you with templates to give you a good, solid start that then allow you to modify them based upon your own organization, or you can even bring in your own ones, the ones you've already created as well, The important part of that is that they're mapped to the control sets. And I'm going to show you a little bit about how that works. Lastly, our system has workflow built into it. So this area that's called requests, when you are doing an assessment or having someone do an assessment with you, it's not required that one and only one person do that. You can spread out workflow responsibilities for people to answer things that are what I would call relevant or germane to their domain, so that you have, good workflow and good collaboration on these items as well. And before I go into that, I won't go deep into this, but you'll notice if I show this little thing called assessment, within all of our frameworks, we provide what I've called is that crosswalk. So at any given point in time, like currently, we obviously have the synchronization between NIST and CMMC level 2 and CMMC level 1, if you fit into that area. But again, when these new changes come out, as we mentioned, we will already have those crosswalks in place. So for instance, if I wanted to crosswalk my NIST to my HIPAA security policies, this just gives you a sense of what controls are related to those. And when you use these types of processes, again, it basically saves you time so that you don't have to do an assessment more than once. You can have things that are relevant map across, and we'll guarantee you that that will be the case when these new version 3, revision 3 controls come out as well. I'm very briefly going to just go in to show you how folks are using our solution and doing their assessments or having folks do assessments with them. In this particular setup, we have activated the CMMC V2 controls and the NIST 800-171 current controls. As we note, there are 110 of those, and so by adding them together, you've got 220, which we saw on that first tile. Again, pointing out that because these are the same controls in and of themselves, there's no need to answer questions more than once. You can do it one time or have your people do it one time, and then you can map those relevant answers to the respective control frameworks. So as an example of filtering, in the case of NIST, there is no level 1 or level 2 set of controls. In the case of CMMC, there is. So if I wanted to just filter on my CMMC level 1 controls and begin to answer those questions, it's as simple as doing that and getting that data presented to you. You can even do it based upon the domains that you're working with. As I mentioned, there are going to be under V3 some new domains that will be added to this. So as soon as they will be brought into the system as well. When it comes to actually answering questions, you can see this particular view is showing me at a high level across these controls what the status is of those particular controls. So some are considered I've labeled as not applicable, some are compliant, some are unanswered. If I were to go in and to click on these, it takes me directly to that particular control. It takes me to the relevant question around that control. It allows me, again, when we talk about it being a continuous compliance application, to add comments, most importantly, to provide and upload evidence. As I mentioned, we have data that can be pulled in that will automate this uploading of evidence or bring in the evidence to support an answer to a question. And as you are answering these particular questions over time, it will record all of that previous history. So if there was a response history here, you would see that on this particular control. In addition, we do a lot to help you and to help our organizations with a lot of good information to help them better understand how to answer these questions. And one of the things that was pointed out in the a positive to the V3 or the version 3 or the revision 3 that's coming out is they are adding more issues and more information around what they might call supplemental guidance. And that will all be brought in and incorporated as it currently is into the SureShield Comply Shield application. So we provide things like guidance and best practices, the implementation guidance. So I mentioned the policies and procedures, what type of supporting evidence you may need, questions that could be asked to help you in that particular process. And it's a very, very simple, straightforward, easy solution to use to help you meet those requirements. I'm going to just briefly step out of here before I go into showing you some of the output that you'll get out of this and touch on the policies again as well. So you can see, again, we have 28 policies that are in here. If I were to filter just on the NIST policies, again, as I mentioned, it can give you a view of compliance from a policy perspective as well. So you can see right now what we're considering in calling this access control policy, or what the access control policy is that we have, is now being labeled as non-compliant. And why is that? Well, there's 22 controls that are associated with this policy. We have 21 of them implemented and in good shape, but we also have one that is not. And very quickly, I can actually go into this if I want to look at this from a policy perspective and figure out what it is or why this is considered non-compliant. And I can see here under this particular control ID and the requirement of authorized wireless access prior to allowing such connections, that we currently have this being addressed in the SSP and POAM. And when that is answered as such, meaning you are addressing it, you're going to address it to get it compliant, that has a what we would call negative compliance score, or a, as it relates to computing the overall NIST 800-171 score. And if I were to go into this again, then I could go in and look at that question. If I now know that I have done the appropriate things to improve this and get this into shape, I could then switch this to an implemented policy with the proper supporting backup, and then my scoring in and of itself would change as well. So very straightforward, pretty simple and easy to work with. Lastly, before we go into some of the reports you can get out of this, if I were to click into these access control policies as an example, you can see this is where it's bringing up that particular policy. You'll see it gives me a description, it provides policies and procedures, and it will provide any revision history if I've made any revisions to this. You'll note that it's also white labeled to the particular organization. So if it's, if you're utilizing it, would bring in the name of your company, your logos and the likes. And then you have the ability to go ahead and edit these, upload your own policies into this if you so choose. You can download and work with that policy offline and bring it back in. And again, as I mentioned, mapped to all the controls. So really provides a lot of easy, simple workflow process to help you meet these, somewhat complex requirements. And again, requirements that you have to meet as a supplier to any kind of Department of Defense contract. Lastly, we have automated all of the reporting processes. So if you can see, depending upon the solutions that you're using, you can come in, you can run any type of report or compliance report, from what I would call executive summary reports that can be provided to your management to show them where you're at and what you may need to be doing. I did point out the evidence worksheets that are there for compliance. Those are embedded in the controls themselves. You can look at things like the reports on compliance, pick what it is you want to be looking at, what's the time frame you want to be looking at that for. If I were to say, for instance, the last 2 years, I can actually see how things have trended over time, or I can look at the trends in terms of what my compliance has been like and what I'm doing to fix things and the likes. And all of our reports can be scheduled. They can be outputted into Word. They can be outputted into Excel if those are relevant, into PowerPoint, into PDFs. And as I said, even scheduled so that people are getting them on a regular basis. And for those of you, of course, because a lot of this is focused on the requirements as it relates to the Department of Defense, we've also embedded all of the required DFARS reporting documents. And again, continuous in nature. So if I were to look at this 800-171 reporting, as we know, there's an algorithm that's used for computing those scores. I would suspect potentially that there could be some changes even to that once these new controls are put into place. But if there are, our system will actually generate and compute that relevant score based upon those. And it's interesting, as many of you know, the highest score you can get on a NIST assessment score is 110 because there's 110 controls. So when you've implemented them, you get a score of 1. However, if you have not implemented them, there are some controls that have a higher, I would call maybe negative weighting impact, meaning they're more risky if you don't have them in place, and therefore they have a negative scoring impact on that as well. So if you were to start this cold turkey and hadn't answered any questions, I think you would start out at a score of like a negative 180. But the highest score you can achieve is the 110. And it is expected and at least surmised that on a go-forward basis, currently, you know, the requirement is to submit this score, submit your plan of action and milestone report, which we provide to you and automate for you, as well as your system security plan. But it is expected that there are going to be minimum reporting and scoring requirements that you'll have even to participate. So the sooner you begin to get, particularly for those who haven't done it, you get this in place, or even look at how you can continue to improve on that score, the better it will be for you in positioning yourself for new current contracts, as well as your preparation for the CMMC auditing process as well. And I'm just showing you, again, the full automated system security plan, which takes into account certain network-related diagram issues, as well as the computation of your scores as it relates to the various assessment processes here as well. So I'm not going to spend any time right now outside of just letting you know, again, that we have solutions as well that can help you with performing what we would call the vulnerability scans, which are a requirement for these types of solutions and reports. And our system will do that for you. We also have products that will help identify CUI data for you as well. And that, again, is a requirement of the NIST assessment process, is demonstrating proper processes for computing and protecting CUI data. So with that, again, here's just a quick example of our scanning solution and showing me what it's scanning, how often it's scanning, where the urgent issues are, where my vulnerabilities are, and most importantly, in our case, how you can remediate and how you can fix those and what that impact has on that as well. So I'll go back to our presentation briefly. And we'll get ready to wrap up and save you all some time. As I mentioned, we are making an offer, which we've done for most who tend to take it up, the ability to trial this solution. We'll open that up as we get into answering questions for you. So if you have an interest in actually trialing this out, we allow you to do that at no charge for 30 days. As I mentioned before, we also will, if you are one that has done an assessment and you would like us to bring that data in, we can bring that data in so you can kind of work off of that on a go forward. And as I mentioned, again, the beauty with working with our solution is we also will make sure that the crosswalks, when these new revisions are in place, you're not going to have to worry about, do I have to go back and redo all this? We'll make sure that you already know what you have, what's in place, and we will do the relevant mapping so that we're not adding any additional burden of work for you. And that is a pretty important process right now, given your need to comply today, what's coming here in the actually not too distant future, both with the NIST changes and with the CMMC final rule implementation coming as well. And I will also point out, we have access to all what they might call the C3PAO assessment processes. So within our tools, we also know we'll know what is going to be requested of you as a supplier. And we've configured our system to make sure that it will it'd be able to output, should need be, all the requisite data that you would need to provide to a C3PAO who would be auditing your system here as well. So how do we help again? Obviously, you can conduct single assessments and harmonize across frameworks. We'll get all the data you need in place to submit for your current requirements with the SPRS. And really, we can help you prepare for that audit. And we can do it at a much lower cost. We can do it quickly and really help you comply without defocusing on, the primary focus of your business, which is doing what you do and getting the contracts that you want to get from this process as well. So with that, I see we have a number of folks that have indicated they would like to be set up a trial. Just note at the end of the session here today, for all of you, everybody will receive copies of the presentation itself, as well as copies of the webinar. And then for those of you who have indicated interest, there will be a link to ask you to briefly pick a time that works good for you for us to set up that trial for you. And it really won't take more than about 10 to 15 minutes to give you access into getting that set up. And so let's go ahead. Chandi, I haven't been monitoring the questions, but are there ones of particular relevance? I know I've seen you've answered a few questions. Any that are specific you want to make sure the audience, and I believe the questions you're answering, everybody is able to see, correct?
That's right, Tom.
Okay, good. And I know that James is asking a question about the C3PAO audit. Yes, there will be, I think you probably answered it. Of course, it will be expected there will be costs to that. We don't know how that is going to be set out amongst them, whether they'll be standardized or not. But it does stand to reason that the more data you have, the more prepared you are, will require less of their time to go through that process as well. Other questions? I see that, Chandi, you're answering the question. I think I answered it at least verbally around the known costs for the C3PAO audit. I would encourage you to reach out to maybe folks to get a sense from them around what that may be. And just so you know, if you go to the CyberAB website, there is a marketplace of companies and providers that are either going to be certified C3PAOs that will do the accreditation process, and you can talk with them to get that sense of their costs. There are also what they call RPOs, registered provider organizations, that can help your organization if you need outside help in getting prepared and getting through this process. We have a lot of those that actually work with us. They provide services beyond what we do, but they leverage the SureShield software to help streamline that process. And again, we're even more than happy to put you in contact with any of our partners if you need help on that realm as well. Chandi, do you want to answer Stacy's question? And I believe you are. So the question is around where the data is stored, and the security of that. We house our data. We're leveraging Amazon as a provider as well, and meeting all the required security protocols as it relates to the protection of that data. Also, we are not necessarily housing your data. We're providing, when you are putting things in, like, and Johnny, correct me if I'm wrong, evidence is it's actually linking just to the evidence, not necessarily directly where we're housing that data. So with that, I don't know if there are any other questions. For those of you, again, we'll leave the poll open for a bit. If you are on and have perhaps changed your mind or might think that you're interested, I'll keep the poll open for about another 5 minutes. And please respond yes if there's interest. If not, again, we'll be reaching out to you, to everybody. For those who have indicated maybe later, again, SureShield will keep you updated on our activities. And we will shortly be showing you some of even the newer versions, or what I would call the next gen enhanced versions of our solutions as well, and hope that perhaps we can present those to you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause and stop the recording, and that will be sent out to you briefly. Again, we'll keep the poll open for a little bit longer for you to respond. And if not, we appreciate your time. We wish you the best in this process and hope that SureShield potentially can help you in your journey to complying with these requirements. Thank you again.